Bluegrass Jamalong is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If you want to improve your playing, join me and thousands of other pickers getting better every day at pegheadnation.com. Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jamalong, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of Bluegrass Jamalong. My guest this week is Sierra Hull. I caught up with Sierra a couple of years ago when she was over in London and we had a chat, and it was really cool to get a chance to talk to her again because some stuff's happened since then. She's been continuing the tour with Bela, Fleck, and we talk about that, but she's also been touring a lot with her own band, and we chat a little bit about that as well. She has a new record coming out, and there's some info on that, which is all in the can now and is sort of ready to come out early next year. And also a couple of singles she put out, covers of Tears for Fears, Mad World, and also Grateful Dead's Black Muddy River, and a couple of holiday singles that are on the way. Just fascinating to catch up and see what she's been up to and where it's leading. I'm sure if you followed Sierra over the years, you realise she's not somebody who puts out a record every other year, and there's a process in there, and she takes her time and waits till she's ready, and it's really exciting. There's a record coming out, and I can't wait to hear where it goes, particularly after being able to hear her band IBMA in September, and what an astonishing group of musicians, and we talk about those a bit as well. So yeah, just a really, really interesting chat. I think you're going to enjoy this one. Here comes my interview with Sierra Hull. My guest on Bluegrass Jamalong this week is Sierra Hull, who comes back to the podcast after we had a chat last year when I met her in London, a gig at King's Place. And she was very busy then, and she's very busy now. So I'm absolutely delighted she's taken the time to come back. Sierra, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
It's been pretty much of a whirlwind for you, isn't it, since everything opened up again post-pandemic?
Yeah, it's turned into another incredibly busy year, just busy season. You know, I do it to myself, so what can I say? But, I still love it. And, sometimes the travel's a little crazy, but all the musical opportunities and things have been just really wonderful this year. So it's been an overall really fun year of growth and, visiting some really amazing places and all that good stuff as well. So, when I look back, it's all been worth it and been really cool.
And it was great from my point of view because I got to see you play with Bela over here in London with that band. What a great show that is. But also see you with your band for the first time at IBMA this year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. The Bela tour, that kind of, I went and actually did a festival in Mexico with my band called Dead Ahead at the beginning of this year, and then kind of went straight into the tour that you saw with Bela, which was, that whole trip was probably, 40 or 50 days for me, one of the longest of the year, because shortly after you saw us there in London, that was at the beginning of that tour. We did 3.5 weeks or so on that tour and went to a bunch of different countries, a lot of places I hadn't been before too, which was really exciting. And then Justin and I had a little window in between where we ended up staying and kind of going to Italy and having a nice little trip there just for fun. And then my band flew over and we did a tour with Brad Paisley, which was about another week, and then flew right into some U.S. dates. So it feels like that kind of kicked off the tone of the year in that it was just going to be a busy one and has kind of continued to be so. But that was definitely one of the crazier trips of the year, but also was so cool getting to be over there. And of course, always love getting to come to London. So thanks for coming out to that show.
It's an extraordinary show, that Bela show. I wasn't sure what to make of it because it's a long album full of twisty, turny, complex, dense music that could lead to quite a sort of an earnest show, and it doesn't. It's just such a joyous thing just to see you guys play together. But just it's really serious music held very lightly, isn't it?
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear you say that because sometimes as someone so inside it, and as someone that has like lived with that music for a long time and played that music with Bela a lot, it is hard to almost like remove yourself from that perspective and know what it would be like if you just kind of walked into a show not knowing what you were coming to see. It's a lot of notes and a lot of music over the course of one night. So, definitely for that music forward crowd, that listening crowd, but such a joy to get to be part of making that music too, because that band, I mean, that's been one of the highlights of my musical life, really getting to play with those guys and, just trying to really savor the moments that we've had together on stage because, they're just heroes, friends. Yeah, pretty wild to get to be part of that for sure.
It sounds like, kind of, I spoke to Brian after the show and he said you'd sort of flown over from, I think, Dublin or somewhere the night before and you were all sort of running on fumes slightly. I'm like sitting there in the audience watching that thinking, what would that be like if they were all fully rested? Like, goodness.
Well, it's funny. I don't particularly remember how we all felt about that one show, but it is, I do remember the first few days of that tour being pretty crazy in that we flew to Paris. I think we did Paris, then maybe, I don't remember the order of events. I think we did Glasgow, Dublin, London. So at that point we'd had like flight after flight after flight. And then London after that show was when we finally moved on to the tour bus. And then the rest of the tour was all driving from there, which certainly makes things a little bit easier, than the flying day of, but yeah, I mean, I think we were just all excited because it was also the early part of the tour. And sometimes that's really special too. Even if you are a little tired, the excitement of like, getting back together and playing music that we hadn't played in a while, there's something really fresh about that too.
And there's a real energy, I think, sometimes with a UK show because we feel lucky to get to see this stuff sometimes because it's not often that financially viable to tour or to bring stuff over. And Celtic Connections is great for that because people come over for that and then build a tour on the back of it or whatever, So it's there's an excitement in the room for something like that in London because it doesn't happen that often. Yeah,
I mean, Bela was talking about it had been a long time, especially since he had been able to bring like a bluegrass band. Maybe it might have been the first time really that he brought like a real kind of, bluegrass ensemble over. So I know he was really excited as well, when you think about all the stuff that gets to do, continues to do, and has done in his career. So it was fun to feel like we were part of something that felt really meaningful and special to him too, to get to like bring that show over and present it for all the audiences there in Europe.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was great. And then sort of, as you say, full on into your own tour this year, which is ongoing. There's more dates before Christmas and then a whole bunch you've just released for the new year as well. And it sounds like the recent leg of that was fairly chaotic.
Well, yeah, we did just have one of the crazier tours of my life in September where I guess right when you saw us at IBMA was kind of on the tail end of that tour as well, where, just all of you can spend years touring and then just sometimes you'll have like a week or two or three. In our case, we're just like everything kind of goes wrong on the travel front where it'll be smooth, 98% of the time. And it was like, I think we went through 3 buses on that tour 3 different companies. I mean, one was an absolutely brand new bus too, that just 40,000 miles on that thing. And it broke down with like a bad alternator or something. So it was just like, a streak of bad luck as far as the travel side went. But truly it's, again, I can say, I laughed and told Justin at the end of this, I said, well, I guess this is really a testament to like, it's the kind of tour that I think a lot of people would have been like, get me out of here. I'm never doing this again. This was really tough from a travel standpoint of just like lack of sleep, making things happen, last minute flights, getting off a bus, cramming all of our stuff into minivans, driving these long drives only to get back on another bus. It was just like, crazy stuff, left and right. But like, I still will look back on that whole tour fondly because the shows were all really fun. And I think sometimes when that kind of stuff happens, it forces you to, do different things. Like the first night of the tour, we were waiting to leave. And, usually there's a spot here, actually not too far from where I live, where a lot of tour buses meet up in a parking lot, a Kroger parking lot, actually. It's very common. And so we were waiting there with all of our stuff, and a lot of people had things dropped off because we were going to be gone for so long, didn't want to leave the vehicles that long. So everybody's just waiting for the bus, and the bus was running late, and our tour manager calls and was like, hey, what's going on? And they said, well, turns out the bus driver had to pull over like 15 minutes. He's 15 minutes out from picking you guys up, but like something weird is going on with the bus. And so long story short, he says, we think it's a small fix, but we're not going to be able to get the part till tomorrow. We were 11 hours from our first show in Pennsylvania. There's no way to get there unless we flew. The problem with that is we had just gotten a bunch of new gear. So not to bore anybody, but we had like a new front of house console, a new monitor console. And so all of that stuff, normally we fly so much already, and the bass is set. We've got the folding or the removable neck bass for our bassist, and he's got the case and all that stuff to fly. So our fly rig is usually pretty seamless, pretty smooth. We've kind of got it down to a science at this point. But because we thought, okay, we're basically getting to the end of our flying stuff this year, let's go ahead and incorporate the new gear and get that set. It was all set for bus. So it was like in rolling cases. The base case for flying had been dropped off like 40 minutes north of town for repairs because we've flown so much this year. So it was kind of like midnight, and we're sitting there going, okay, the only way to make this happen is to like book flights right now. So we booked flights, and we're at the airport 5 hours later, flying to our first show without a base, without most of our gear, with just a handful of clothes, like knowing we can't just, take everything we need right now for the 3.5 weeks that we're really going to be gone, hoping this bus would get fixed. Then our monitor guy stayed behind so that he could so we shoved everything in my garage. The bus came to my house the next day. They got it fixed. They drove over. Justin and our monitor guy loaded everything onto the bus out of the garage. And we're like, woohoo, okay, great. We're at sound check for the first show, thinking the bus is going to meet us at the next show. We'll get all of our stuff. The bus broke down in front of my house. Just in our neighborhood, this big giant bus. I was like, oh no. And just stuff like that. So finally things ended up all coming together, but it forced us to do things like change our sound setup, where we did more of the show around one mic and some of the performing arts kind of venues, even like some of the club dates, that kind of a thing. Eric had to borrow a couple different basses, and then a band member got sick in the middle of it. Eric, our bassist, got sick. So we did a show without bass, which I can't tell you the last time I've done that, but we sort of turned it into a living room vibe. And I took requests for 95% of the show. I was just like, what do you guys want to hear? And I just played anything the crowd wanted to hear. So, there were some really memorable things that happened in the tour, that sometimes just chaos creates the beauty of all that too. So anyway, not to be so long-winded about it, but it's definitely a tour I will remember. I'll say that.
I mean, I think if your bus breaks down twice before you've done the first gig, that's, pretty strong sign it's not going well.
And not only that, but I think travel, I think most musicians that might be listening to this, whether they're, or even just whatever, people trying to go to festivals or whatever, it's travel's just crazier than ever. I think with between airlines and buses, and everybody was on tour in September. So I think we had lines out to 40 different bus companies trying to find a bus, just trying to get a bus. And there was nothing available. So I just think these buses and stuff, everybody's constantly touring. So it's rather than getting proper maintenance, they're probably dropping off one band and getting cleaned up and taking another band out. And if you just happen to be in the cycle of it, something going wrong, you're just, stuck trying to scramble and figure it out. So, bless all the tour managers out there working hard for everybody, trying to just keep things afloat, because it's crazy. The travel's been really crazy this year. But again, the shows have been some of the most rewarding of my career thus far. So that's the kind of the flip side of the coin, I guess.
Well, I'd like to talk about that a little bit because it's the first time I've seen you with a band. I've seen you a couple of times before, like you and Justin as a sort of duo. I've seen you as part of Transatlantic Sessions over here, but I'd never seen you with a band. And it's an extraordinary, I mean, talk about kind of serious music held lightly and delivered with a smile. It's such a great show. I mean, presumably the show's
Thank you.
different across the tour. But I'd love to talk about who's in the band because it's an extraordinary combination.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so lucky to get to have these guys out there with me. As you know, traveling with people, especially in times like what I was just describing, I mean, you become like family. You just do, so they are truly some of my favorite musicians, but just good humans too. And this particular band, some of them we're coming up on close to 4 years of playing together now. And then Eric, the bassist being the most recent, but, so Sean Richardson is the guitarist, who also does some singing in the band, occasionally plays some banjo, both acoustic and electric sometimes, but mostly acoustic. Avery Merritt is the fiddle player, also does some singing, a little bit of guitar playing here and there. And Eric Coveney on upright bass and Mark Rodabaugh on drums.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? Because it feels like it's a band with a drummer, but essentially if you swap those drums for a banjo, you've got a regular string band there, and it takes it to a totally different place. And was that kind of a conscious thing to want to play with him, or was it like, I need a drummer, who shall I get? It was like, how did the band take the shape that it's in now? We'll be right back with you just after this. The long-awaited Hill Country series from Collings Guitars represents a new voice in their acoustic lineup. Rooted deep in the bluegrass world, these new Dreadnought NOM models feature a strong fundamental tone with a dry, warm and woody character that's sure to catch the attention of players who hold the vintage instruments of the 30s in their highest regard. Watch world-class pickers Jake Workman, Kenny Smith and Bob Minner perform with new Hill Country instruments on the Collings Guitars YouTube channel, and learn more at collingsguitars.com. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. With 65 streaming video courses for guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, dobro, bass and ukulele from some of the leading names in acoustic music, Peghead Nation has something for every picker. You'll learn the tunes and techniques you need to join in at jams and play the music you love, plus advanced techniques like improvisation, theory and ear training. Your first course is just $20 per month, and you can add more for $10 a month. Sign up for any course and get your first month free with the promo code JAMALONG, all one word. Join thousands of other players, including me, who are advancing on their instruments and having more fun playing the roots music they love at pegheadnation.com.
Yeah, well, so I made the record 25 Trips that came out in 2020. And I, prior to that, had been kind of on the heels of touring my album Weighted Mind, which actually I did with Bela producing. And that album was very much like singer-songwriter forward, but with the context of mandolin woven throughout. So like, very instrumental forward too, but in the context of like, more songwriting form. And so it was myself and a bassist. I'd mostly been traveling duo with him. And of course, prior to that, just a regular bluegrass ensemble with banjo is all I had ever toured with. So to kind of strip things away, go into the season of touring for a few years with just, bass and mandolin, and then occasionally like Justin would play, or I experimented with some different versions of trios for tours, just having people come guest, like my friend Eddie Barbash on sax or Mike Seal on electric guitar. So I was already playing around with like some different sounds in that time. And then I made the record 25 Trips, which I tried to just be open-minded about what that record could be. As I was building things back in, I knew I didn't want it to be as sparse of a record as what Weighted Mind was. I wanted to kind of get back to some form of a band. And I was open to what that could be. And then we added drums to a handful of tracks on that record, not the whole thing, but just a little bit. And so it was then that I kind of started trying to entertain what that might be like, or what that might feel like to have drums. But I was always very hesitant to do that, because I'll be the first one to say, which is funny as someone that has drums in my band, I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to the bluegrass stuff, in that, drums and bluegrass has never been my favorite thing. It's like just in the trad 4/4 standard time, kind of like, if you're going to play Blue Ridge Cabin Home, you basically got everything you need and then some with just kind of your traditional ensemble, right? And playing mandolin, part of your role is to get to be that. That is your job. And so the idea of just playing with any drummer was not appealing to me in terms of thinking like, oh, I just want to add drums, so let's do this. That wasn't really the thinking. I think it was really after I met Mark and he sat in with us. He sat in with me and Ethan, actually, the guy that played bass on my Weighted Mind record. While I was in the process of making the record, and I had John O'Ricks from the Wood Brothers had played some on my record, another just phenomenal player. And so I don't know. I think I was becoming more open-minded to it, but I knew it really would have to be the right person. Because I didn't want, as being a more instrumentally forward artist, I didn't want somebody just stepping on what it is that I'm trying to do, but I didn't want to be playing with somebody that felt like I'm stepping on what they're trying to do and not like, if you're going to have that element, what's the point if you can't have them also do what they do, right? So I met Mark though, and I just found him to be such an incredibly dynamic drummer that like he can totally go full tilt if he needs to and play loud. But like in our band, we really value tone and trying to have the instruments sound as natural as they can. And even just the amplification of having drums on stage and the added stage volume, there's just a lot of things to consider there. So I found his ability to be able to play so sensitively and quietly, but also when you wanted to have those moments where, drums, percussion could be forward in certain songs, that could also exist. And so, we've played together now for, nearly 4 years coming up on it. And, I think that we've grown a lot in figuring out how to manage those things, by both trying to set egos aside and be like, hey, on the bluegrass stuff, rhythmically, you want things to lean forward. It's just the general, like anybody that plays bluegrass knows you get that feeling, you get that sound. The chop is, usually slightly on the front, not the back. Whereas in most popular forms of music, the snare drum is more like laid back, So we're kind of coming from two different worlds here to where that could be clashy. But I think we've found ways to kind of navigate and learn from each other in that there's certain songs that it's like, hey, on this bluegrass thing, I almost need you to barely play. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be times where like we have kind of the joke because I've never been, if I'm being 100% honest and transparent, I've never been a big fan of the train beat bluegrass thing where the snare is, and it's like this consistent thing. Because bluegrass is so dynamic and it's like part of it is the push and pull and the moments where things swell and the moments where you have those gaps filled in, but it's not just a flatlined thing. And sometimes adding drums can turn it into that. So, I've been very honest and transparent with Mark about like, hey, if anybody can crack this code, I think it's you. Like, and the thing and him being very open-minded to like what my vision of trying to figure a way that the bluegrass stuff can kind of exist. And of course, without banjo, you kind of have that missing piece, which, we all love and wish we always had with us, but trying to create that energy without making it feel like it can't move and breathe and tip forward the way bluegrass does and have that feeling. While at the same time, if we play something that's more of a drum forward kind of thing, I'm learning how to like lean back and have a pocket that feels good by trying to relax and, chill out the bluegrass instinct in me of wanting to just be like right on top of the beat. So it's been fun. I think we've pushed each other to like, him figuring out how to exist in a more bluegrass context and me figuring out how to exist in a more drum context. We're constant. You wouldn't believe how much we still talk about it all and care about it and just trying to always make it feel, better across the board with all the music we're playing. We're very proactive about, trying to keep pushing to improve on it all.
Well, it's funny you talking about that kind of leaning forward, leaning back thing, because I was watching him on stage with the red hat at IBMA, and there's tracks where he brings the snare drum out front and you're doing the more sort of bluegrass thing and he's playing that sort of train beat thing. He's leaning forward over the snare drum And like when he's playing the more drum centric stuff, kind of, you can see his shoulders are back and he's sort of sat back on his stool, and it's almost like a physical embodiment of where the beat is. It's fascinating.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so cool to watch.
Totally. And it's been really fun to kind of like have this hybrid band in a way where, like, you know, me, Sean, and Avery grew up playing a lot of bluegrass and really love and know that world, but our bassist and our drummer really didn't. And so, you know, as we're kind of, you know, sharing the things from that world that we love, and they're sharing things from their world that they love, and us all kind of, you know, finding ways to push each other and grow. And I think it's the beauty of playing with the same people for long enough that I've been lucky that these guys have kind of stuck around, at least for now. 'Cause you wind up like having more opportunity to just get comfortable with people and really know kind of what they bring, how they respond to rhythmic ideas, how they respond to harmonic ideas, things like that. And then there's a certain amount of trust that develops after so long of playing with people that I certainly also felt with the Bluegrass Harp Project, because we played that music so much. So it's cool when you can have the same group of people play together like that, long enough. I think, you know, we've really felt a shift over the last year, especially of being so busy this year. Yeah, this is the most this band has toured, was 2024. And it's kind of one of those things that only like time and repetition can bring, I think.
That's interesting about that kind of getting to know each other thing, because when I spoke to you right at the beginning of last year, you just recorded the kind of Freshgrass Concerto. And I remember you talking about having written that for these people, like written it for voices, not just for instrumentation. And there's some drum stuff in that is inseparable from the composition of the piece itself. And there's all sorts going on in there. But it's not just a case of a drummer playing a part along to a thing that already exists. That is an integral part of that piece, isn't it? And you did, I think it was the third movement you did at Raleigh, wasn't it? And yes. that went down a storm. And it's I'm fascinated to hear the whole thing when we get a chance to, because that is complex stuff, but it also contains like lots of different energy and like almost moments of humor at times. It's like it's playful.
Yeah, I wanted it to feel playful because, like, I think that was part of the inspiration. Is I wanted some things to be through composed, and I wanted everybody to have room to bring their own, improvised bits to it as well, so that there could be that spirit of bluegrass, which is obviously a lot of improvisation. And so trying to find ways that we could kind of, have those through composed moments, but meeting the playfulness and improvised freedom, so to speak, that bluegrass brings.
Yeah, and it was interesting hearing that, and because this is not a kind of tour for a new record or anything, so it was interesting hearing that, and also the two new songs you got out recently, the two covers. And I was curious as to kind of how the journey towards a record is coming along, because I remember you'd said you'd recorded the Freshgrass Concerto and you had some more things coming up, but it definitely felt like an assembling of stuff rather than here's the material, let's go into a studio. Yeah,
that's definitely kind of been the case. I think that, a lot of this music, I knew I wanted to record and I knew I wanted to eventually, put out, but sort of a couple things, both being, I've been with Rounder Records my entire career. And so, I think I signed with Rounder when I was 13 and made my first record when I was 15. And then, they never pressured me to put out records quickly or anything. So, and I've definitely been, whether you call it a perfectionist or a procrastinator or whatever it might be, but like, I think I've always valued quality over quantity. So I never just wanted to hurry and be like, oh, I got to put stuff out. Now, obviously in today's world, maybe that's not the best business model because everybody just expects, constant. But when my contract with Rounder ended, I finally, after, my last record came out, 25 Trips, that fulfilled the end of that obligation. And I didn't really want to sign a contract back with anyone. I just kind of wanted to take some time to really be a free agent and think about making music as I felt like it, without, and have ownership of my music too, with whatever happens next. Because I feel like we live in a time where that's very much, a real thing to consider, and more possible than ever before to sort of assemble the team you need to put out your own music that way. So part of it was, taking time to make sure those steps were things that I felt good about, before rushing to put out any of this music. And both even on the management side, I made a switch maybe about a year and a half ago. So kind of settling into a place, of comfortability with some of those things, before I just started releasing a lot of this stuff. So now it feels like we've kind of found our flow and, are in a place to start putting some of this out into the world. Now that, in addition to how much I've toured, I mean, even just seeing some of this stuff to the finish line has been tricky because, again, because I'm not one to just be like, oh, cool, let's just go make a record in 2 days and put it out. It's like, I want to be, really, I'm in the mixing process now of the new record. And so making sure that we really, do our due diligence and trying to make it sound the best we can and that sort of stuff. I just always want to make sure whatever I'm doing is something I could look back at, 20, 30 years from now and feel proud of. Now, that doesn't mean I don't look back at stuff and go, oh my gosh, I sound so young, or, you know what I mean? Like, oh, that was whatever. We're always going to be our worst critics, right? But knowing that I at least did the best job I felt like I could offer in this moment in time. So new record is coming in the first quarter of next year, which I'm really excited about finally. And, hopefully the current plan is to follow some of the Freshgrass stuff, after that. So hopefully that'll be coming middle of next year as well. But part of doing these covers was just people have asked for so long, Mad World and Black Muddy River became two songs that people requested constantly for the live show. And, and they'd say, oh, where can we get your version of Mad World? Or, when are you going to record Black Muddy River? And so finally, in thinking about seeing all this new original music to the finish line and knowing we were going to put a lot of that out at the beginning of the year, we just went in the studio and recorded a couple tracks there for the fans to release and just kind of feel like, hey, this is in some ways maybe a primer for what's to come. So here's a couple tracks with this band, also being able to put some music out that's actually recorded with the band I'm touring with and kind of represent that moment in time. We released Mad World and then released Black Muddy River. And then in November and December, we actually have a couple Christmas tracks coming, or holiday tracks rather. And, excited about that. That'll also be offered on a 7-inch, as well, with an A side and a B side in time for the holidays. So it's been really fun. It feels kind of like we're finally in a flow of, finishing up some of the music I've kind of been hoarding away, and some of that music that we've been playing live too, that we workshop live and be able to finally, offer that to our listeners.
So the record, so you've got the Mad World and Black Muddy River and then the kind of holiday single, but the album is totally kind of original new stuff apart from those. Exactly.
Yeah. So these are just kind of fun tracks that we just wanted to put out. I've honestly not, recorded or released many covers in my life. I mean, in my career, not that I've released a ton of music anyway, like I said, I've kind of been slow to put things out a little bit, but yeah, this just felt like songs that I've really enjoyed doing and, felt nice to be able to just actually put them out there for people that want to hear them.
And how did how did those two make it into your live set in the first place? Because they're both from very different places.
Yeah, well, Mad World I've been covering for years. So that one was kind of definitely overdue to just record and put out because people have asked me about it for so long. But I guess I first started doing it when I was touring with Ethan Yojevitz, the bassist I mentioned that I made the Weighted Mind record with. It was around that time that I was on the road somewhere, and I hardly ever turn on the TV in the hotel room, but for some reason I was at a hotel somewhere, and it was around Easter weekend, and I turned on the TV, and there was some kind of show on NBC or one of the big networks, and I think it was Seal, the artist Seal, who was singing Mad World on this program that I think might have been like a Tyler Perry Easter something. And, and I only caught like a little bit of it. It was on when I turned the channel over there, and I was like, what is that song? You know, the do 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 do. The whole thing is just that's such a earworm kind of a melody. At least it was for me. And it's one of those songs that you kind of know without knowing how you know it. Maybe if you can't place it in the moment, you're like, what is that? I know this melody. And so I was reminded, oh, what a cool song that is, in that moment. And then shortly after, I came over to the UK and did a tour with Ron Block, and we stayed at this Airbnb, I think in Leeds or somewhere, and there was a piano at the Airbnb, and it had a music book on it, and opened up it was like, you know, wide open on Mad World, like the piano chords and notation and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, that's that song. And so I don't know, I felt like it was following me around a little, the song, where I just like stumbled upon it 2 or 3 times. You know how like if you've never heard of something and then suddenly you see it everywhere, it's kind of that sort of thing. You're aware of it. And so I remember pulling up the recording, both, you know, Tears for Fears and the Gary Jules version. And just, I don't know, just thinking it was such a cool song. And then when I would be hanging out, warming up or whatever, I just finally started messing around with it on the mandolin, and particularly like in the key of B minor, to get a little bit nerdy, the mandolin part is nice because you can leave that open D string and kind of do a hybrid picking thing. And I just thought it just sounded so nice, even as like an instrumental version of it on the mandolin. And then got with Ethan and was like, oh my gosh, we should cover this song sometime. And then, you know, just started playing it. I used to play it on electric too, a bit more. I used to travel with my Mandocaster mandolin a bit more, and we would do it that way. So it's had a few different lives, I guess. But then when I started playing it, particularly like having, you know, this band that's touring with me now play it, we did a more acoustic stripped down version for a Paste magazine thing, at Delfest, like maybe year before last or last year. I think it was last year maybe. And like, you know, that video got a lot of eyeballs and, you know, I don't know what really qualifies as viral, but a couple million, you know, views. And especially after that video kind of took off, a lot of people were like, oh my God, please play Mad World, Mad World, Mad World, you know. So that's really when people started asking for it a lot. And so we finally were just like, man, we should just record this, because people have been begging us to put it out. And I love the song. I've always loved it. So it felt like there was a good moment in time to do that, along with Black Muddy River, which kind of had a similar thing happen where a lot of people saw it and wanted to hear it. Black Muddy River. Now I can say that song, to pivot to that song real quick. I did a show in North Carolina with this thing called the Everyone Orchestra, and they wanted to do it was either like a second night or something where they did a Grateful Dead tribute or of some sort, and was like, hey, do you want to sing a couple songs on this show? And so I was like, okay, yeah, sure. This was probably, I don't know, 8 years ago or something like that. And I mean, who doesn't know the music of the Grateful Dead? Like, whether you think you do or you don't, you probably do, like from other people covering or songs that you might. It's kind of like Bob Dylan's music in a much different way, but like, you know, you'll go, wait, Bob Dylan wrote that too? You know, and so a lot of times you'll hear songs just kind of out in existence in the music world, or people jamming stuff and be like, oh, that's also a Grateful Dead song. Okay. And so I don't know, I had heard so much Grateful Dead music just kind of floating around in my musical life or hearing live things, but had never really quite paid as much attention to it. I don't know if it just maybe hadn't grabbed me too much at that point, through the live versions, because there's just so much of it, you know, and sometimes there's this, it felt a little bit like this club that a lot of people were a part of, but like, I didn't know if I could like authentically say, oh yeah, I'm a fan, because I just hadn't really quite dove into that music yet, you know? And so this opportunity gave me a good chance to really go, well, okay, yeah, I'll sing a couple Dead songs. Let me go just like listen to a bunch of stuff. And so I just went listening, and I found that, man, some of these studio recordings are awesome. They're really like complex songwriting and cool harmony ideas and some really cool stuff. And so I stumbled upon the studio version of Black Muddy River and just thought, that's a beautiful song. Like, I would love to sing that. And so started singing that. And then the band, like, I sang it for that show and really didn't cover it too much after that. And then the band and I had just started playing it, and we did something for Relics, a live appearance on like a Relics live stream thing. And, I guess they kind of built a lot of their thing off of being Dead fans. So I was like, oh yeah, we should do this song, and then a lot of people started asking for it after that. So.
And that's the classic example of a song that leans back and takes its time. It's, not doesn't have that head forward leaning ahead of the beat thing. It's,
absolutely
such a beautiful languid groove to it.
Absolutely.
And it's funny you talking about starting to cover Mad World around the time of Wasted Time, because it sort of feels like lyrically it could have fit on that record in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got a very thematically similar sort of essence to it, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always been attracted to those sort of melodies, I think, the sort of more mysterious modal kind of sounds and songwriting and, especially the way they sound on the mandolin or octave mandolin.
There's something about, an octave mandolin is an interesting one because it's easier to sort of capo and have those ringing strings and play around a bit more. But there's also something about those melodies that aren't in a major key but don't feature kind of bluesy sounds. Like, as soon as you start putting blues into things, it steers it in a certain direction. And if you've got stuff that's got that sort of tonality without that, then things sound quite sort of timeless almost, don't they?
Sure.
Quite hard to pin down.
Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, I've always been attracted to the idea of like timeless music, things that you don't know if it's a new song or something that could have been around for a long time, and that's probably from growing up hearing old hymns or hearing, like a lot of the just like old folk songs and things that, you can't quite pin down where that came from. Maybe it, came over from, the old world and stuff that people, have kind of put their own spin on. And so to have new songs that kind of feel that way, I think I always feel a connection to.
Yeah, yeah. So more tour dates the rest of this year, tour dates for the first 3 months of next year. The record's out, you say, the beginning of next year.
Yeah, should be out in the first quarter of next year. Yeah, I mean, it has felt a little like, so much touring, but it's been a great season of growth to be able to continue to, also like return to some of the places doing my own stuff that maybe I've got to hit on the Bela tours or stuff that this band hasn't got to do yet, like our next tour, and our final tour of the year. I guess we've got one show, kind of a fun Halloween show coming up this weekend in like just a suburb outside of Chicago. But, we're going out to, like Nebraska and Iowa. And of course we've done Wisconsin before. We've done, Minnesota before, but, just kind of getting out to some of the places that, we don't get to go to as much. And it's been a while since we've been out on the West Coast. So a lot of the tour dates we just announced, this week, we'll be getting to go out to, hit some of those places like, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, places that, we love getting to go, but we've not been in a couple of years at this point. So.
Well, it's cool. I'm excited to hear the record, and best of luck with it. And I wish you every possible convenience of bus travel through this tour. If you're going to all those places, I hope you manage it all on one bus that lasts the course with you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Wonderful. Thanks. It's been so cool talking to you again.
Hey, Matt, great to see you. Thanks for having me on. And, I'll be listening to all the other great interviews and things you're doing.
Thank you. Bluegrass Jamalong is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.